happened in a place where people came for healing, yet that night, the sharp sound of a slap cut through the quiet aisles of the pharmacy like a thunderclap. Shelves of medicine rattled. A young pregnant woman staggered back, clutching her stomach, her wide eyes reflecting both pain and disbelief. She wasn't a stranger in this pharmacy. She had come there late at night because her body was weak, her pregnancy had made her fragile, and she needed vitamins her doctor had prescribed. But instead of care, instead of support, she had received humiliation. Her husband, a wealthy CEO admired by the world outside, had just raised his hand against her in front of strangers, all because his mistress was watching. Viewers, before we go further into this heart-wrenching story, let me pause and ask, if you believe that kindness, second chances, and justice still matter in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Stories Collection. Your support helps us bring more real and emotional stories to light. Her name was Elena. She had grown up in a modest family, her heart full of love, dreams, and innocence. She had never imagined herself in the glittering halls of high society, nor did she chase wealth. But when Daniel, a successful and charming CEO, noticed her at a charity gala, her simple world was turned upside down. He was handsome, eloquent, and persuasive. Elena, who had always believed in love over riches, thought she had found her fairy tale. And for a while, it seemed true. Roses every week, gentle words whispered in the dark, and promises of forever. She had given him her heart, her trust, and now she carried his child. But behind Daniel's polished smile was a man poisoned by ego and greed. He thrived on control, on power, and on appearances. Elena was a trophy in his world, beautiful, loyal, and quiet. But as soon as her pregnancy began, his affection shifted. He found her too demanding, too sensitive. And when temptation came in the form of a younger woman from his office, someone who flattered his pride and mirrored his ambitions, Daniel's loyalty crumbled like sand in the wind. That night at the pharmacy was not an accident. Elena had gone alone because Daniel had insisted on driving his mistress, who feigned a headache, to the same store. When Elena saw them together, her heart broke, but she tried to remain calm. All she wanted was to collect her vitamins and leave. But the mistress, sly and jealous, whispered venom into Daniel's ear. And instead of protecting his wife, instead of shielding the mother of his unborn child, Daniel exploded. He raised his hand, struck Elena, and told her to stop embarrassing him. Gasps echoed in the aisles. The pharmacist froze. Customers stopped in their tracks. And then, from the shadows of the back office, a tall, silver-haired man stepped forward. His presence was calm, commanding, and filled with quiet power. He was Senator Raymond, Elena's uncle, the very owner of the pharmacy. The room grew silent as he approached. His eyes locked on Elena, trembling and pale, holding her stomach as tears streamed down her face. Then his gaze shifted to Daniel, who suddenly shrank under the weight of authority. Senator Raymond had watched his niece from afar for years, respecting her choice to marry a man of power, but always worried about the way Daniel looked at her, as if she were property rather than a partner. Now, he had seen enough. Raymond didn't need to shout. His words were sharp and steady. He told Daniel that a man who struck a pregnant woman was no man at all. He reminded everyone present that titles and money could never excuse cruelty. He demanded that Elena come with him immediately, promising her safety, care, and dignity. And for the first time in years, Elena felt the heavy chains of fear begin to break. In the days that followed, the story spread. The incident at the pharmacy had been captured on security cameras, and though Elena never sought revenge, justice came swiftly. Daniel's board of directors turned on him when the footage reached the media. Shareholders withdrew their support. The mistress, once a symbol of his pride, abandoned him the moment the scandal grew. And Daniel, who had once walked with arrogance, now found himself alone, despised, and stripped of power. For Elena, the journey was not easy. She carried not just her child, but the scars of betrayal and the weight of public scrutiny. Yet, in her uncle's home, surrounded by warmth, she slowly began to heal. She found strength in her unborn baby, reminding herself that her life was not over, it was beginning anew. Months later, Elena gave birth to a healthy daughter. Holding her baby in her arms, she wept, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. She had survived. She had risen from humiliation to dignity, from fear to freedom. She vowed to raise her child with love, to teach her that no woman should ever settle for cruelty disguised as love. As for Daniel, he attempted apologies, letters, and desperate gestures. But Elena never looked back. The man who had broken her trust had no place in the new world she was building. She walked forward, stronger than she had ever been, guided by the quiet strength of her uncle, the cries of her daughter, and the unshakable truth that love should heal, not hurt. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, I ask you to take a moment right now. Please like, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories of resilience, justice, and second chances. And if Elena's journey moved you, please leave a comment below with your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. Special request to comment: what lesson do you take away from Elena's story? Share your feelings in the comments. We read each one with care. Was not just the sound of the slap that silenced the pharmacy that night, it was the betrayal it carried. For Elena, it was as if the world had frozen in that instant. She felt her cheek burning, but deeper still was the fire in her chest, the ache of realizing that the man she had once trusted more than herself had chosen humiliation over love. As her hands instinctively shielded her unborn child, 1,000 memories rushed through her mind. The nights Daniel had promised to protect her forever, the moments he had kissed her forehead while whispering that she was his everything, the vows they had spoken on their wedding day. How quickly those promises had crumbled. Her body trembled, but her spirit fought not to collapse. She glanced around the store, ashamed of the eyes staring at her, eyes filled with pity, judgment, and shock. A pregnant woman slapped in public, it was not just violence, it was a message. To Daniel, she had become nothing but a burden, an inconvenience he wanted out of the way. The mistress, standing just a few feet away, smirked with cruel satisfaction. She had long envied Elena's place in Daniel's life, and now, In front of strangers, she felt victorious. But what she didn't realize was that her moment of triumph would soon unravel in ways she could never imagine. Senator Raymond's steps were deliberate as he crossed the floor. His tall figure carried a quiet storm that demanded respect. Customers stepped aside, as though sensing something monumental was about to happen. He did not rush to comfort Elena immediately, he looked at Daniel first. That gaze, steady and penetrating, was more powerful than any outburst could have been. It was the kind of gaze that stripped a man of his excuses and revealed his shame. Daniel tried to mask his guilt with arrogance, straightening his suit jacket as if authority still clung to him, but inside, he already knew the tide was turning. Raymond finally turned to Elena, and when she saw him, her knees weakened, not from fear, but from relief. She had not called him, she had not asked for his presence, yet here he was, like a shield sent by fate. She wanted to collapse into his arms, but she stood tall instead, realizing that this was no longer about hiding her pain. This was about reclaiming her dignity. In that moment, Elena understood something profound. Silence had kept her trapped for too long. Every time she forgave Daniel's cold words, every time she accepted his excuses for staying late at the office, every time she allowed herself to believe his shifting affections were temporary, she had given him permission to diminish her. But not tonight. Tonight, in the heart of that pharmacy, surrounded by strangers, she decided she would not stay silent any longer. The days after the scandal were a storm. The video of the slap circulated across news channels and social media. Journalists painted Daniel as the ruthless CEO who valued pride over family. Business partners backed away from him, unwilling to be associated with disgrace. Even those who once envied Elena for marrying into wealth now spoke of her with sympathy, praising her courage for leaving a man who had betrayed her in such a cruel manner. But Elena's healing was not instant. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake in her uncle's guest room, listening to the soft hum of the city outside, and feel the sting of memories creeping in. Sometimes she wept silently, fearing for the future of her child. Sometimes she clenched her fists, angry at herself for having ignored the red flags that now seemed so clear. Yet in those moments, she would feel her baby move inside her, a gentle reminder that she was not alone, that she carried a new life depending on her strength. Her uncle remained steadfast by her side, offering wisdom without forcing decisions. He told her that true strength was not in pretending to be unbroken, but in rising again after being shattered. Slowly, Elena began to embrace that truth. She attended prenatal classes, surrounded by women who, unlike her, had supportive partners by their sides. At first, it hurt to watch them laugh and hold hands with their husbands. But soon she realized she did not need envy. Her path was different, but it was no less worthy. When her daughter was born, Elena felt a flood of emotions she could barely contain. As she held the tiny bundle against her chest, every scar, every humiliation, and every wound seemed to melt into something new, something pure. Her baby's first cry was not just a sound, it was a declaration that life had triumphed over cruelty, love had outlasted betrayal. Elena whispered a promise to her daughter that night, She would never let anyone make her feel less than she was again. Daniel, meanwhile, descended into a life he had never imagined for himself. Without the adoration of society, without the admiration of investors, he was just a man haunted by his mistakes. He reached out countless times, pleading for forgiveness, but his words carried no weight anymore. Elena never hated him, hatred was too heavy to carry. But she no longer needed him. That was the deepest truth. She had finally understood that her worth had never come from his approval. And so, Elena walked forward, not as a broken woman, but as a survivor, a mother, and an example of resilience. Her story became a quiet inspiration for others, proof that even in the darkest of moments, dignity can rise, and love, in its purest form, can still bloom.